Welcome to the Kings Highway reunion. It's been 5 years since we started filming the movie. And I'm Jason Sherman, the director.
Bob Penn, I'm a relative of our beloved founder, William Penn.
Debbie Clack, local historian. What can I say? I know Jack and Fred very well, many, many years.
Jack McCarthy, I'm an archivist and historian and characters in Northeast Philadelphia history.
Fred Moore with the Northeast Philadelphia History Network, and happy to be here.
Hi, I am Trinity Norwood. I am a citizen of the Nanticoke Lenape Nation in New Jersey. So these are our ancestral lands.
And you and Bob Penn were both at the inauguration of the sculpture at the Penn Treaty Park together, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think of that ceremony?
Oh, it was long overdue, and it's a really a beautiful site. Hope that someday they'll do a lot more with it.
Absolutely. You know, I think it's so important for Philadelphians to know the beautiful history that they drive past right there every day. So I thought it was a wonderful event.
Absolutely. That brings me to the first topic of, the film and how we tried to, focus on all these beautiful areas and all of these different facets of history that people seem to have forgotten about. What have you guys seen since the movie came out? What have you heard? What have you seen from people who've watched it about Northeast Philadelphia?
Oh, I had an excellent response from people, relatives I haven't heard from in years, and even high school classmates and so on who sometime over the last couple of years finally saw this, and they were just so appreciative and complimentary. As one person said, I walked by that place every day going to high school, and I never realized that it was such a historic place. And that was, I thought it did a lot of good, maybe more good than we'll ever realize.
I'm still hearing feedback from people. People want to know more, and I think that it's had a great impact as far as, especially in Frankfurt, with the awareness of the Frankfurt Y. I gave 3 architectural walking tours the past year and a half in Frankfurt, one under Preservation Alliance, and then with the help of Oscar Bisart on that one, and then the awareness of that 1548 Adams Avenue. I'm just glad both places are being preserved. They're there, and people are asking me more and more, what more can we do?
Yeah, I think the film was great in bringing, a greater awareness of Northeast Philadelphia history to, a wider audience.
It definitely brought awareness. I did, as Debbie was mentioning, I had a couple of presentations, or was approached for presentations on the film. I talked a little bit about the film, but I kind of used that as a takeoff point. But that's how I got in the door down at the Northeast Regional Library. And so I just discussed Northeast Philly history, in general. So got me in a couple of doors, and still gets people coming in our doors if we ever open them again.
And we will, at some point in the future, we will. And we'll all look back at this and say, wow, we lived through the next yellow fever or Spanish flu.
Well, I do a lot of public speaking and some educational programs, and I run into people all the time, and they're like, you look so familiar. It didn't click until you started talking. I saw the film. So it's definitely opened a lot of doors for me when it comes to educating about Native history, because a lot of people up until watching the film didn't think about the intertwined history between the Lenape people and the early settlers. So it has allowed me to educate people further on my culture. And it has also allowed some people who interact with our tribe to open their minds to parts of our history. We have a long-standing relationship with the Quakers, with the Friends, and some of them saw the film and said, oh, I knew that, we've been interacting and we come and support each other's events my whole life, but I didn't realize how far back it went. So I think it's definitely opened a lot of people's eyes to how deep and rich the history is.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, it's thousands of years you guys go back, right? You guys beat everybody when it comes to who was here and when. And speaking of going back, if we go back to like the Spanish flu or the yellow fever epidemics that we had here, What do you guys see as some of the similarities or differences that we're facing today that we faced back then?
Well, Philly's handling it better this time around, I guarantee you. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I've heard that. I've seen it suggested in different places that Philadelphia's history with the 1918 epidemic helped to shape its more aggressive response this time around. The Spanish flu was circulating around the nation, around the world, and was sort of getting worse. And Philadelphia had this massive rally and parade in the fall of 1918 against health experts' advice, because it was during World War I, and they were trying to raise money and sell war bonds for the war effort. So, and it was after that this sort of massive infection happened, and all the people started dying in Philadelphia, ended up being, the worst hit city in the United States. So I've seen it read that sort of the long memory of that helped to make some people more aggressive in trying to contain it this time 100 years later.
Well, it might be something that those who spend a lot of their time in Northeast Philadelphia cemeteries and other unusual places that others don't go, in several instances, there were so many people who had died that they had to have mass graves.
All right.
And so there are cemeteries. I know of at least one, Magnolia Cemetery, where my great-grandfather is buried, that there are thousands of people buried there in what amounts to an open field. My grandfather's older brother, Charles Penn, caught the flu, and within 2 days he was gone. And they really didn't have, he was one of the people that they just had to, what do? You left a widow and two children. And unfortunately, there was nothing to do but put these people in large trenches and cover them up.
It sounds similar to what we have to do today in the hospitals when they get overrun and they're just
Yes.
flying at body bags and throwing them into a trailer or a dumpster.
Yeah, and there was no refrigeration, so and as you also know, if you spend a lot of time in the sometimes absolutely beautiful grounds and so on of the cemeteries in Philadelphia, especially in Northeast Philadelphia, that it was, even if you were an everyday person, people would, throw some money in a pot and they at least see that you got a proper burial and had some kind of stone or whatever put on your grave. Well, that all came to a quick end. So this was a cultural shock.
When it comes to cemeteries, you mentioned cemeteries a lot, as well as, and you guys know a lot about the buildings that were featured in the film, as well as the different stories that each of you told. All of you guys told stories of different kinds. What have you seen happen in the past 5 years since the film came out in terms of the awareness of certain buildings or cemeteries or protections or people that have now started visiting these places? Have you seen more people interested in these buildings and stories and places?
I have more attention being brought to some churchyards in Northeast Philadelphia. Also, buildings like Trinity Oxford, they're getting their footing now, Trinity Oxford Church. They're starting to, it's sad, they don't have many people attending the church anymore. So, but they do have a core group of people that are paying attention to what's going on, but that churchyard is important. The buildings, like I said before, the Frankfurt Y, it's beautiful. If anybody has a chance to stop by, you need to see it inside and out. And the 1548, the Worrell Winter House. That's, of course, Jason, you know about that too. That's really...
Well, as the 15, just so everybody knows, and this is for the community to know as well, 1548 Adams Avenue has been renovated. The man who purchased the building, and we've been working with him for, I'd say, about a year or two now, Debbie, where we've been going back and forth. He started renovating it and then he stopped, and then the pandemic happened and he figured, now's a good opportunity to finally historically renovate that property. It's supposedly the oldest house in Northeast Philadelphia from the 1720s, and he's been restoring it, and he's almost done. So I believe we can all have an open house there in the next month or so and finally see this building back to where it was back in the 1720s. So we're excited for that. We're excited for that.
I would say that there, in recent years, there's been a more sort of aggressive effort to get buildings on the Philadelphia Historic Register. Oscar Beisert is kind of one of the leading figures in that. Joe Mankiewicz did a lot, but somewhat in the Northeast, but just overall in the city. I think the Historical Commission, was sort of overwhelmed for many years and understaffed, and it's got a little bit more staff now, although I don't know, with budget cuts looming, it might go back to where it was. But there just seems to be more concerted effort all around to preserve buildings. And then, the mayor's task force, it came out with some good recommendations and that were adopted by city council to help foster. So things are happening sort of at the macro higher level across the city to be sort of more proactive to save buildings.
That's great. Sounds like some progress has been made from what I can tell as well.
I have definitely experienced working with Penn Treaty, with the park itself. They have put on quite a few more events that share Native history. This year we'll be going digital, but last year Penn Treaty Park hosted Indigenous Peoples Day. And it was a wonderful event. We had, it was a record breaker for us. It was our third year, and we had about 300 people in attendance throughout the day. So I would say, it's just fortifying that bond between the Indigenous community, the Penn Treaty, and the history that happened there, and giving us the opportunity to share that history with people who walk past Penn Treaty or jog at Penn Treaty or, take their dogs over there and don't realize, that is such an historical place for the history of the city.
I actually went to that event, so I remember there was good music and there was people everywhere. It was pretty awesome. But a lot of people say that we are living in an episode of Black Mirror or Twilight Zone, and all of these crazy things have been happening in 2020. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts? Did you ever think in your lifetime you would be living in the way the United States is right now? And what are your thoughts on what's happening and what life is now like?
Well, I thought climate change was going to come a little bit later, or the effect, they really hitting hard with climate change. This is basically what I kind of had in mind happening, say, 50, 60 years from now. So it's just speeding things up a lot.
I was a teenager in the 1968. People are comparing that year with this year in terms of just, social upheaval. And this year is going to go down in history as one of those sort of pivotal years, like 1968. So, yeah, I think we're living through, one of the most epical years in modern history.
Looks like we have a special guest from the Gray Lodge Pub. Scoats is here. What's up, Scoats?
Pandemic's changed my life completely. None of my businesses are really open. Or they're open in some sort of extremely limited way. The upside of that is actually I had a lot of time to actually spend at home going through a lot of stuff that I bought, and was actually able to organize my kitchen and everything and put up a shelf that was on my landing for 12 years. So everything's a lot more organized and clean now, which is nice. I found some things I didn't even realize that I owned. It's like, oh, this is really nice. You got a spiralizer to turn zucchini into noodles. So you can make some nice healthy dishes with
Oh my God. This is what I wanted to hear right here. You can make zucchini noodles for everybody.
I made some the other night.
Oh,
Fast, easy, healthy. So, and now I'm at the Gray Lodge, gradually going through all 3 floors, methodically going through all three floors, just pulling everything out and moving it elsewhere and trying to start over whenever we can in a completely fresh fashion, which I'm in my 27th year now, and
Wow.
we were always open 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. So there was never the time to do that. It was always, you had to keep moving. You had to keep shoveling coal into the engine. So now the engine's parked and I can actually do stuff to it.
Sounds like you've been taking advantage of this extra time then.
I was at a party in December or January, and a guy who I knew from way back was all excited to see me because he saw me from the movie and was introducing me to his grandson.
Looking at really what is around me more than, oh, okay, this person's pointing out this one and this and all these tours, but I haven't been doing any tours because of the COVID. So I've been going through all my paperwork and looking at everything and trying to get it all in order. And it kind of gave me a real perspective of to how to move forward when this pandemic's over. But people are getting depressed. I live near a friend's hospital. People know where I live. They know it's the oldest psychiatric hospital in the nation. It's 100% full to capacity. I have two neighbors that work there, and they said people have lost jobs and their homes, and they're very suicidal. They're very depressed. They don't know where to go. A lot of them have families. So it had a big impact on me that way. And as far as looking at the mental health aspect of not just the virus, but the whole mental health aspect of what is going on here. And it's sad how things are going to shift, and maybe for the better. We just have to hope that maybe this is for the better. Maybe this is going to be an eye-opener for us. We'll maybe look back on this and say, hey, you know, all kinds of things are going to shift and change, and there's going to be different perspectives. I don't know. That's my viewpoint.
That's a great way to look at it. That's a great way to look at it. I just wanted to mention, based on that, is that because this pandemic happened and the whole world was shut down and everyone was forced to relearn how to live their lives from home versus constantly traveling and constantly going out and constantly doing things, people had to realize what was more important, not only in their lives, but in their community, their family, their work. Maybe they were unhappy with the way things were. And I think it was kind of a huge reset button. It was like a world reset button to say, look, you all have a chance to now figure something out differently, figure out what makes you happy. And now you have more time to spend with your family, which is a good thing and a bad thing, because I'm sure the divorce rate is skyrocketing right now. But at the same time, for these kids that were going to school, now they have to learn at home with their families and spending more time with their families. So it's a good and a bad thing, but at the same time, I think that, you know, people finally realize that, you know, taking selfies at the bar every night and taking pictures at the airport when you're going to Paris isn't the end all be all. There's things you can do in your own community that are also important.
I'm only 30 years old, but my grandmother turned 97 this year. And yeah, in June, actually, just a little while ago. And so while all of this craziness has been going on, you know, I go and I call her and I check in on her, and her evaluation of all of this was, you know, she's lived for a long time. And she said every generation has a pivotal turn and a shift, an event that happens that changes things and resets how we're looking at our futures. And that's what she's counting this time as. And I know in my experience, it really has. It's allowed me to reevaluate things and spend more time with my family, you know, even though it has to be video chats and things of that nature, you know, especially for my family, the younger kids, are working more closely with older family members, teaching them how to video chat and checking in on them on a weekly basis and things of that nature. So it has been a difficult time, but I am so reassured by those sparkler moments where you get to see something exciting happen and people connecting in ways that we didn't before all of this, because life is moving so fast.
I guess I could say without any hesitation that I'm really worried about people changing history, changing it in a way that oh, there's only good people and bad people in history, and that from the perspective of hundreds of years later, we're going to judge people, and even if previous generations revered these individuals, we now can make the judgment, oh no, they're terrible, they were terrible, there was a terrible person. Let's take down certainly any monument, statue, and eliminate their names from any serious discussion of history. You simply cannot do that and wind up with a true perspective of where you came from and where you are and frankly where you're headed. I just find it shocking that people would think that we can only accept people now in any historical context unless they were perfect people, and there are no perfect people. And as I refer to him as Cousin Willie, William Penn, the founder of Pennsylvania, is someone who for over 300 years has been held in the highest regard in England and Wales and Scotland, and certainly here in the United States. And was he a perfect person? No, he was not a perfect person. He probably, if he was able to join this conversation, I think he would say, no, I wasn't perfect, and far from it. I had my faults, but hey, give me credit for at least founding Pennsylvania and Delaware and a lot of other things that I never asked for credit, and he didn't. That he left that to posterity.
And I know some of you guys have, we talked like here and there over the years, we talked about some of the hobbies you guys have. And if anything this pandemic has done, it's given us time to work on new things, maybe some side hobbies or side hustles or new jobs or projects. I want to hear some of the things that you guys have worked on in the past couple months, or even the past couple of years since the movie ended. I'm just curious what you guys have been doing.
For many years, I've been working with this 85-year-old phenomenal Philadelphia jazz musician on his autobiography, and I never had time to really focus on it and get it done. And so for literally the last 10 years, and the guy's gone from 75 years old to 85 years old in that time. And so I finally am sort of focusing all my efforts on finishing that once and for all. It's about 3/4 finished.
That's great.
Hope to publish it in early 2021. So that's kind of what I've been doing on my COVID vacation.
One of my goals throughout the pandemic was to get better at beadwork, which requires a lot of patience, which is something I've always been lacking. So I have been doing it. I can't say I've gotten any better, but I am trying. So I think that counts for something. And another thing that I've been working on is an educational book series for elementary children on Lenape history. It is something I've been putting off for probably maybe about 8 years because I get to go to schools and they always say, I wish there was something that we could have here so that we can have an educational program here without having you to come in and we only get you for one day. So I've been able to get that together. Right now I have 5 books that are just traditional stories that I learned growing up, which is, I always think that's the best way to teach kids about other cultures, to let them, get a taste of the culture. So it's some traditional stories, and I'm working with my mom to make some instructional guides for how to make some of the crafts some of our kids make when they're young. So I'm hoping to get all of that together and be able to make it available online for teachers as a teaching aid. And I guess as well as parents now, seeing as school's going to be a little different in the fall. Yeah.
That sounds great. It sounds like you're being really productive, and the whole education piece is really important nowadays. So that's really cool that you're doing that. So whenever you're done, shoot it over to me. I'd like to see it. You can post it on the Facebook page.
Oh, absolutely.
So definitely send it over.
I'm busy, but not history-wise. The only thing I've done history-wise is working with Oscar Bisart and doing the determination of eligibility for the National Register for All Saints Church. So that's already been put in. Actually, it was put in March, right around the outbreak of COVID, the pandemic. We're waiting to hear that, and then we'll work on the actual national nominations. So hopefully we could do that. Really, really looking at my house and looking at things that I don't need anymore. I don't want anymore. Let's put it that way. So I'm actually just purging and lightening up. That's all. Spending time with the grandkids only because both my children are essential workers, and so I have to watch them occasionally. So I spend time and get to spend more time with the grandkids, actually.
Did just start the jam up again in a small way outdoors with masks. It ain't fun singing with a mask on.
No.
But I've been doing some carpentry around the house that my wife has been bugging me about for years. And so I'm getting that done, but I'm still very involved in history. And Debbie brought up the National Register. I did the first step on that for Pennypack Baptist.
There's three things I was able to do during the pandemic that I previously kind of kept slacking on. One of them, I told myself if I ever had the chance, I would learn yet another language. I already speak Spanish and French, but I wanted to learn Portuguese. So I've been teaching myself Portuguese the past couple months, and I'm getting pretty good at it. I also always regretted the fact that I only played the violin and not really the piano. So I had a keyboard at home, so I started practicing the piano, and I've gotten pretty good at the piano. And this past July 4th weekend, after 3 months, I finished a brand new screenplay, 100 pages, that I'm going to be shopping around Hollywood producers. We'll see what happens. So I've been trying to stay as productive as I possibly can, and I have really long hair now. I have not cut my hair in months, so I think I'm going to leave it long.
I've been retired for the last 6 years, I had to move earlier this year, and of course I spent, as most people do, you move into a new place and suddenly you've got a lot of painting to do and fix up and so on. So I've been doing that, and but those projects are now pretty much done, and so yeah, I hope the pandemic, at least Pennsylvania's version of it, is over soon, so I can get back to the things I normally would do, like visit historical societies. I'm a member of about 10 different historical societies, and I regret I can't get down. I live in Allentown now, so I can't get down to Philadelphia as readily or to these meetings as I often did in the past. But there's much work to be done, and if anyone comes up with a project and they need a volunteer, give me a call. I'll be happy to assist, even if it's just making telephone calls or digging through all of my research and letting people know what perhaps they don't know.
We have this really active Northeast Philadelphia History Network that, used to meet every month. And I guess in the fall, Fred, we're going to probably switch to Zoom meetings. Our biennial, every other year, Northeast Philadelphia History Fair is going to be, it's March 20th, right, Fred? Yeah.
Correct.
2021 at Constadter's again. It was a huge success.
Yes.
Last time. We had, incredible.
Great.
Yeah, so we're going to be doing that again, March 20th, 2021, a Saturday.
I always say, to describe a powwow, it's kind of like a native carnival is what I call it. It's a big public cultural sharing event. So they typically last 2 to 4 days. And there is dancing, there's storytelling, there's craft vendors, there's food. It's a little bit of everything. And different tribes and native groups host powwows.
Nice.
And so they're all over the country. And I don't do it too much anymore, but my family used to travel almost the entire summer from about May to about October. Almost every weekend there'd be some powwow we'd be driving to, and it's great. You get to dance, and you get to meet people from other tribal communities, as well as, you know, people from the public. So I've made quite a few bonds through powwows and that I use today for working with Indigenous people, as well as some of the presentations that I do regularly.
We have to keep reaching out to our communities, keep pointing out those buildings before they become ghosts. I do want to say one thing. There is another church I have my eye on, and I do believe that it will probably close. So it's St. Mark's Frankfurt. I know that it basically is just running on empty, and I don't know how they're running. So, and I'm on a history committee of the Episcopal Diocese that oversees this, but I don't think they're doing enough. So it's kind of irritating me, needless to say. So
Hopefully
we have to
something
keep
good
the
will happen.
momentum going.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to that history fair. Thank you, Fred and Jack, for that, because that is so important. That draws so many people, and it really draws people into these different historic areas and places. You do a really good job with that. Thank you so much.
Well, this is a good opportunity to start doing some more online stuff. I'm thinking more using the tools of history, deeds, wills, maps, and that sort of thing that you can present on a screen and talk a little bit about, field some questions. And so this is a good opportunity to do that and give people a little more insight on how we study history and on how they could study their local history.
It's interesting. I think the Northeast, that now that it's the most diverse part of the city, I think there's a real opportunity to look at all the history that we have. A lot of it used to be quite new, and now all that stuff's 60 years old, plus the stuff that's 300 years old, or like older than that. So it's an interesting time. I think people are ready for it.
Well, thank you for this invitation for a reunion. I'd be the first person to laud the benefits of attending that history fair there at Constadters. I went the first year, and I didn't make it last year, but that's really the kind of thing. Got to do something like that maybe twice a year. It's just
Barely get it together every other year. I don't know that we could do it once a year.
No, we can't do it every year.
maybe you need a little promo or something. I mean, according to Jason, we all have star quality.
You do.
And who knows? I mean, Debbie says she doesn't worry about these things. I'm getting $100 a shot for my autograph. So
I'm going to sell it on eBay if I find it.
That's funny.
Awesome. It's great that you guys are still being active. Thanks for coming, and keep being active online too. Don't be a stranger.
Right. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
No, thank you,
Yeah.
Jason.
See ya.
Take care.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.